as you are very aware, that was one of the planks, the major planks on which President Buhari got elected. But in the most recent Transparency International rankings, Nigeria scored 28 out of 100. So what do you think that the present administration is not getting right on corruption, and what would you do differently?
What they haven't gotten right is that any fight against corruption in a systemically corrupt environment has to be comprehensive. It has to be a composite of preventive measures, then sanctions, underpinned by a change orientation that is driven by exemplary leadership, telling the people that corruption is costly to everyone and every sector. And so to that extent, I will lean on my knowledge of many years, many decades of work in that space of good governance and anti-corruption as one of the founders of Transparency International. And in our understanding, corruption is prevalent in environments where opportunities for corruption are much. So the more you create opportunities for corruption, the more the probability that you would have plenty of corruption. So what it means is that this kind of structural change in the economy that we would pursue, for example, there was a time when the telecom sector was a harbinger of corruption in this country. There might still be some corruption going on, but the structural change of that sector meant that the opportunities for corruption, public sector corruption, ended significantly. Therefore we would focus on the preventive aspects. Preventive aspects would include institutional and systems reforms, procedural reforms. I was recently saying to somebody that a country like South Korea makes it not necessary for you to have person-to-person contact with the bureaucracy in doing a lot of things. So that prevents opportunities for corruption, because every time that you have discretion as a basis for decision making within government, it's not just in Nigeria, but in other societies, plenty of corruption happens. So just those kinds of structural changes, reducing the dominant position of government in the decision-making process that has anything to do with economy, would reduce corruption significantly. Then the sanctions part of it. If you did all the things that prevent people from being corrupt, there would be diehards who would still indulge. Now, you need to have a system of sanction, law and its enforcement, and prosecution, appropriate sanction, that will create a deterrent factor so that people know that predictably, when they engage in corruption, there would be no sense that anyone is superior to others in not facing the consequence of their choice. Today, the people who pay the price for corruption are the poor. We need to change that completely. The people who must pay the price for corruption would have to be those who first engage in grand corruption, because there is grand corruption and then there is petty corruption. And so those who engage in the grand corruption need to be decisively shown that they would not have the profit for bad behavior. And when that happens, it begins to correct the environment of tolerance for corruption. And, you know, these two key things rest on the exemplary leadership. Exemplary leadership is to live by the values, not to speak the values. Living the values would mean that the president leads with everything possible as an example, showing that the moral and the values climate of the society is changing.